When trying to make an organic shape of a building look like it's three-dimensional, it's a good idea to use what's called a gradient warp. And what we're going to do is do an example of a gradient warp render. So to begin with, I'm going to choose the blue roof as the area that I want to warp. And I'm just going to reduce the opacity of that blue so that I can see the lines in my building coming through. So it's a nice sort of semi-translucent blue. I'm also going to hide the roof temporarily. And just above the roof, I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to call it Gradient Warp Roof. In creating that layer, I'm going to need a marquee. So I'll just draw a marquee and my gradient is going to go inside this marquee. So you need to make sure that your marquee is not too big. It just needs to cover the area that you're working in. And I want to add a gradient in this space. Make sure that you're on the correct layer. Click the classic gradient options, click the gradient bar, and just choose maybe a gradient that has a couple of values in it to begin with, or you can just choose any one really and then create your own. I'll begin with this one, and what I'm going to do is click on the left, stop, and then sample from the picture. Click on the left stop and sample the hues from the picture that I've got in front of me. So it's just picking up all of those sort of soft, almost creamy ivory colors that are in the building. And even very subtle changes in color are worth adding to your gradient because it just makes it all look more realistic. Okay, I might have a couple too many in there and I can get rid of the ones I don't want. Alright, don't forget that you can delete any stops that don't look right. So I'm pretty happy with this selection. I think this will give me enough variety. And you can adjust these little diamonds in between to create the gradient that you're after. So this gradient has a tinge of blue in it, which is perfect. So I'll go okay. Then I click on the left and drag to the right, hold shift to keep that warp nice and straight. Now there's a really harsh line here which I didn't necessarily want, so I might need to adjust the values in there. That's better. So click on the left, drag to the right, hold shift. That's a nice soft gradient. What I need to do now is just reduce the opacity once again of that gradient warp, just so that it's very faint, and you may wish to bring back the blue underneath just so that you can see what you're doing. What we're going to do is work with the gradient warp roof. I still have my ants marching around. I can either go Command T on the keyboard, right click and choose warp, or I can go into edit, transform, warp. So either one will work just fine. When you're about to do a warp, you should be able to see this grid pattern appear, and then you just need to adjust your gradient so that it's sitting slightly over the top of your building. So slightly over the top of the building. I'm just going to bring these anchors in. And you'll notice that the ants are also moving. So it's just going to take a little bit of time to manipulate that mesh and get it into the position that you need it. You can pull back these handles, okay? Make them a little bit smaller if you need to, but you'll notice that I'm not really taking that gradient all the way to the edge of the building. I'm just adjusting it very softly and easily, just to try and follow the direction of this roof. And it does take a little bit of manipulation. I think I'll leave that one over there and we will see what happens. So once you're happy with the mesh position, and I think this one might be okay, just grab another tool. So any other tool, and that will convert that mesh into pixels. I'll just escape from the crop. Now what I want to do is use this shape that I've got underneath as a cookie cutter. So I want my ants around this blue roof. So hit Command on your keyboard and click this icon on your layers palette, and you'll notice that all the ants are now marching around the roof. Select Inverse and then go back to your gradient warp and hit delete on your keyboard. Okay. Select, deselect the ants, and then let's reveal this layer at 100%. So that is the gradient to match the building that I'm trying to replicate. Now, if you find that it's not perfect, like there's some nice gradients in there, but it's not really perfect as you wanted it to be, what you can do is once again place your mouse over the blue roof, Command and click, so it's recognizing that shape. Create a new layer over the gradient warp roof and just put subtle airbrush over the top. And what we might do is sample, just make sure that you've got a regular brush, general brushes, a nice soft brush with zero hardness. That's more like it. Brush tool, sample the color you're after. So I want to make sure that my eyedropper samples from this soft sort of mauvey color, mauvey gray, and then you can add some brush, nice big brush, and just soften this area. Okay, so that just takes away some of that harsh blue stripiness. I mean, it might work just fine. Right, so as you can see, you need to build a couple of layers just to tackle one area. So that is using the gradient warp tool.